Yes, the Crimson Guard. We've had these mentioned numerous times, and we got to see a bit of the uniqueness of this group in Midnight Tides, specifically the avowed Iron Bars. But I wanted more. Now I've got more. Am I satisfied? Welcome to Fantasy for the Ages, the show where a father and son talk about fantasy, science fiction, and other nerdy things that we enjoy. Today, I'm here with a rapid review, full spoil discussion about Return of the Crimson Guard, a novel of the Malazan Empire by Ian C. Esslemont, his second volume in this whole story that is Malazan Book of the Fallen. If you enjoy what I have to talk about today, I hope you'll hit like and you'll subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so yet. Most of you here have probably already subscribed. This is an episode only appropriate for those of you who've already read this book. I'm going to talk about my thoughts on everything that happened in this book. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to talk about everything that happened in this book. Too much! But I'm going to get into some details and some theories, and it'll only make sense if you've read it, and it'll ruin it for you if you haven't. Okay, going into this second novel of the Malazan Empire by Esslemont, I was pretty optimistic and eager, even though I'd heard some people not so keen on this one, some even describing it as Esslemont's worst book. I'd had a great experience with his first novel, Night of Knives, really appreciating how it filled in some key pieces of the greater Malazan story, especially some backstory elements about Kalinved and Dancer, and Dassam Ultur. Big stuff there about him. I came out of that book with a richer comprehension of the world in which Malazan Book of the Fallen is unfolding, leaving me even more awed and marveling at the tremendous story being put before me. So, of course, I was excited for Return of the Crimson Guard. And at first, indeed, through pretty much the first half of the book, I stayed excited and enthusiastic. I was getting so much of the world again, the bigger world, all over these different continents. Ironically, only some of what I was getting was directly tied to the Crimson Guard, like the title suggests. But I sensed it would all come together eventually. I mean, I'm not a rookie reading Malazan now. I have to admit, though, about 2/3 of the way through this book, I was getting a little worn out. Get on with it already was pretty much my feeling. All these different little plot lines, and it felt like Esslemont was really dragging out the development of where he was taking all of this. I wanted to see where everything was going to go. Okay, can we move it along, please? I'm happy to say about 80% through the book, this epic coming together of all the things he'd built started to happen, and I loved the remaining portion of the book. But before I get into that, I want to highlight the various plot lines that took place with a little speculation from me about what I've learned. First off, we get to see the ramifications in this story of Empress Lacine's earlier decision to allow the Wiccan ethnic group, the Wiccan people of this initial Malazan continent of Quantali, to be the scapegoats for the disastrous Seven Cities campaign as detailed in Deadhouse Gates. There were many Malazans who behaved tremendously well, represented the Malazan Empire with great pride, honor, and courage, not to mention skill in all that happened in Seven Cities. And yet they failed. They fell short. And that failure in the end can really be heaped upon the Malazan commander of Erin, the city that Coltrane led his chain of dogs to. They're right there on the cusp of reaching Erin, and all this guy needed to do, Pormqual, the governor there, was open the doors and send out a little sally force. Let some of the armed forces of Erin go out to help Coltrane's last people as they're surrounded by the army of the apocalypse's rogue forces. But no, Aaron stayed closed off to them. I mean, it did open up to let some escape, but not the military forces. Pormqual was a coward. I have to protect the city, which really was, I have to protect myself. He was a failure as a Malazan commander. It allowed the rest of Coltrane's forces to be destroyed, crucified, and Pormqual even behaves like an idiot and gets the rest of them wiped out in the end. Such a horrific defeat could not be due to Malazan. There's an image to protect, so it's got to be pinned on somebody. Now, it should be pinned on somebody. You could say Pormqual, but really, that piece of crap, Malik Rel, was there, right at Pormqual's side, giving him guidance. He was really working for the forces of the apocalypse all along. Wanting to bring the Malazans down, he spoke his poison into Pormqual's ear, and it all was disaster. So someone's got to pay for that. And oh boy, someone's going to pay. Now it's the Wiccans that end up paying. We've seen them already in previous books suffering back on Kwantali. A pogrom against them, actually, to wipe them out because they are to fault for the betrayal at Seven Cities. But that is garbage. Everyone who was at Seven Cities knows that's crap. But the Empress has been put in a situation where she needed to support Coralodam and Malik Rel due to the support they've rallied around themselves. And so the Wiccans have taken the blame. Now, backing up, Malik Rel is actually the one, like I said, who betrayed the Malazans, a covert agent for the rebellion on Seven Cities. And then he and Coralodam were both working with the rebellion and were high in Shaik's leadership until things with the rebellion fell apart. Both of them ended up at the Malazan capital. Coralodam was in chains, and yet they manipulate things. Mostly Malik Rel. Corballo just kind of benefits from it, riding his coattails. And they end up on top. They end up at the Empress's right hand. And they get the whole blame for everything that happened in Seven Cities shifted to the Wiccans. Malik Rel, in part, was able to pull that by insinuating himself into Empress Lacine's Claw organization and co-opting it for his own purposes. She knows something smells funny here, but she's stuck in that situation and goes along with it. All that said, Return of the Crimson Guard has the Wiccans on Kwantali now saying, hey, enough is enough. And they're rebelling against the Malazans. Although they have help. They have people from the beginning days of the Malazan Empire, some of the heroes of old, coming out of the woodwork to help them rebel against Lacine, because they also are done with surly Empress Lacine. It's time that she pays for her choices, pretty much. And that's a theme of this book, because you've got Toke the Elder and others coming out saying, hey, Lacine overthrew Kalinved. She's been making a mess of this empire. We agree. Enough is enough. She's going to get what's coming to her. That's a big part of what this book ends up being about. Heck, the Return of the Crimson Guard? Okay, the Crimson Guard are returning to make sure she gets what's coming to her. They are a mercenary force that's in rebellion against the Malazans and have been for decades, because the Malazan Empire under Kalinved invaded their homeland, devastated it, and defeated the Crimson Guard, but they didn't, capture them. The Crimson Guard had to flee, but it was a flee so we could fight another day. And that's what's happening now. They are coming back to fight another day. Today is that day. And here in this book now, in figuring out what's going on with them coming back to take down Empress Lacine, that's their plan, taking down the Malazan leadership, we learn a key detail explicitly about the Crimson Guard. Their core leadership, as well as many of their other founding members, are way younger looking than they should be, because they're a group known as the Avowed, and they have special powers. Superhuman strength, incredible stamina, the ability to heal from nearly any wound and quickly, and pretty much frozen in age. They've become unstoppable killing machines because, see, they felt greatly wronged by the Malazan Empire, and they were right. It's just, the Malazans were imperialistically branching out, and the Crimson Guard tried to say, no, you can't. And the Malazan was an unstoppable force. In losing and having to flee, the Crimson Guard swore an oath, a vow, to fight the good fight until they bring the Malazans down, bring the Empire to its knees. And this vow, this appears to be some sort of magical ritual that struck me as having some real similarities to what the Talana Mas swore centuries ago in their fight against the Jaggets. The Crimson Guard, however, did it smarter. They are bound to see their quest through. The Talana Mas, they turned themselves undead so that they would be an unstoppable force. The Crimson Guard decided, we don't have to be dead. We'll just be superhumans. But we will commit that we will not stop. And this vow will hold us pretty much in place with some extra oomph until we are successful. There's a couple caveats that we learn here. One is that somewhere along this passage of time, their leader, Prince Kazdavor, disappeared. He went missing. These unstoppable foes, and he's just gone. We don't know what happened. It's some event that happened back a ways. I'll talk about that a little bit more. But we will have him show up later in this book, and he's like an old man now. All the others have pretty much not aged, but he has. Not as much as the passage of time would have indicated, but for some reason, he has aged. And I didn't catch why. There is an explanation, but I don't think it was in this book. But one consistent aspect of the vow that was made when I compare it to what the Talana Mas did is that while this vow is not finished, they kind of can't die. The Talana Mas, they're undead, so you can't kill us. Even if they get totally crushed, they just turn to dust and then they come back. There's some real magic perpetuating this. The Crimson Guard, they can die. They're very hard to kill, but it is possible. I mean, if you cut their head off, they're dead. But they do not move on. Nothing was hinted at until this book. Their spirits remain. Now, helpless to influence fulfilling the vow, but they are there still amongst the other Crimson Guard. They're able to communicate with them, support them, even carry messages for them. And collectively, they're called the Brethren. They cannot move on because the vow is not fulfilled. So they're dead, but they can't go wherever dead eventually go. It's unclear where they eventually go in Malazan Book of the Fallen. There is somewhere. At least maybe they just go to nothingness. We don't know, but the Brethren, the Crimson Guard who did get killed during this interim, are stuck in this sort of limbo. They cannot go anywhere because the vow remains. That was fascinating as they continue to not allow Hood to claim them and take them through his gates. In a way, it was kind of dark, too. They're just trapped. So those who are still alive need to fulfill their vow, not just for themselves, but so that those who are stuck in this limbo existence can finally move on. As this story begins, we come to see that the Crimson Guard is scattered around the world, off on various mercenary missions, following various sub-leaders of the group. Because the group broke up. There was a dispersion at some point when something happened that caused the loss of their leader, Prince Kazdavor. Again, we don't know what that is. I do not believe it's been clarified anywhere. It is referenced, hinted at times, but something happened, a blow was struck, and there's a diaspora. And Davor is just missing. Not dead. They know he's not dead because of the Brethren. He'd be there as a spirit, but his spirit's not there. So he's out there somewhere. All these different groups around the various continents sense it's go time. That's what's happening at the start of this book. It is time to fulfill the vow. The time is ripe for us to strike. we can take down the Malazan leadership after all these years. So we've got various disparate groups of guardsmen all over the place traveling back, headed like arrows for the Malazan capital of Unta. Along this gathering and journey, we come to learn a couple of key things. The various leaders of the Crimson Guard are not all on the same page. They're missing Prince Devor. In fact, at least one of the leaders, the higher ups of the group, Skinner, appears to have gone quite insane, potentially from having gone off rogue on his own during this diaspora and shacking up with some goddess for a time who has addled his perspective and perceptions. It was a little unclear what I was seeing there, but he's off, man. There is something off about Skinner. He was apparently always one you had to watch out for, but now he's gone a bit too far. Others that have gathered, like the High Mage Cowl, their most powerful wizard, appear to have shifted their motives as they're coming back together. Yeah, they want to take down the Malazan leadership and fulfill the vow, but their idea of fulfilling the vow now goes a little further. Certainly for Cowl. They don't want to just take down the Malazans. They want to replace the Malazans. And someone from the Crimson Guard, perhaps, is aiming to be the new Emperor of all. Okay, that was never the point. But some have come to a new point. So we get some of this perspective through the other key thing we learn. Most of the Crimson Guard forces around the world are not avowed. They weren't part of the original group, but rather they're just average schmucks who have been hired on as soldiers of fortune, mercenaries to fill out the group and turn them into an army of thousands of soldiers. But these guys are just working for a paycheck. They're not committed to the vow. They're just doing their job. One of the freshest of the recruits, is a guy named Kyle. And he comes to understand something is terribly wrong with the Avowed. Now, he's new to all of this, so he's still feeling his way through how they work with each other and what's going on with the different hierarchies and stuff. Well, he ends up having to go AWOL because he's in the wrong place at the wrong time and sees one of the Avowed that had been closest to him, kind of taking him under his wing as a mentor, sees him killed. That was Stoop, is his name. Yeah, he sees him killed by other Avowed when they are having it out about this change in plan that's being considered by Cowl and Skinner, and Stoop basically sees what's happening to him, tells Kyle, run for it, go, go, go. Now, Kyle's journey will be weird and interesting, but most significantly, his flight away for his own life is going to lead him into a matchup with Traveler and Eriko, another couple of guys from a totally different plot line that we've been following along in the book going, what is this about? What is going on? I don't understand. Eriko is some sort of, I don't know, ascended being, immortal type. He's been around since practically the beginning of time. He's the last of his race. And he's traveling now with this other guy just named Traveler. Traveler's some mysterious individual with a lot of mojo going on. And he's a very impressive warrior. Personally, though it doesn't get said outright, I think we're reconnecting here with the missing sword of the Empire. Traveler is Dassam El Tur. That's my call. Don't tell me if I'm right or not, but I'm on the record. That's who I think we're seeing here. And he's finally getting sucked back into the story. This group's side quest will end up being to try to find Prince Devor. Kyle is really driven to this because he feels he owes it to Stoop. The Crimson Guard are going down the wrong path, and if they find the missing leader, perhaps he can fix it. He can get them back on track. He can get control of the rogue Avowed. They go off following leads to get to the place where it looks like Prince Devor is buried, is trapped, something. There's some weird prophecy involved, and some things happen at this place, and Eriko, that last of his kind, dies, which is tragic, and Kyle is torn up about it, especially because going right along with it, there's no Prince Devor. It seems like it was a red herring. A dead end. They did not find it. But Eriko's okay with dying. Apparently, he knows this was his fate. It was meant to be. But I wonder if he also knew this other thing because they've picked up this other guy they met in this place, an old dude named Jan. And later in the story, he will eventually admit he is Prince Devor. That's why they didn't find him in the trap, in the tomb, and whatever the thing is. He's already here. Hi, that's me. Prince Kaz Jan Devor. I don't know if Jan's his middle name, but I'm slipping it in there. And they end up then with him. It is a success, and they head to Quantali, where everybody else is going, to see what he can do. So, speaking of everyone else coming together, the other forces of the Crimson Guard, most of them arrive together at Unta to take down the Empress, only to find her not there. And then to be run out of town, basically, by a populace that rises up against them and is willing to do whatever they have to run the Crimson Guard back out of town. That's not what they expected. And the whole thing was actually rather anticlimactic. Things could have been much worse for the populace of Unta, despite the fact that major portions of the city are destroyed by a friendly fire Moranth munition explosion. But basically, the Crimson Guard determined, okay, Lassine's not here, and some of us have died, and this is way more work than it's worth, and we'll just leave now. And off they go. So where are they going to go? They're going to follow Lassine. So where is she? Well, she decided that it was time to head inland to put the Wiccan rebellion to bed. This is a black eye to her leadership. She's trying to run things all over the world, but right in her backyard, the Wiccans have rebelled. And she's got to do something about it. And we end up with this huge confluence of forces in the center of the continent, brought together through these various plot lines, all converging, made more complicated by the release of a formerly trapped ascended being, Rolanderus, a soul taken and divers that we've encountered in a number of the previous books. I admit, I went back and looked, did some research. I'm like, what's with this guy? Wait a second. Don't I know this guy? And yes, we've seen him in multiple books. But at some point, he was trapped beneath the city of Liheng, which has become the center point of what's going to happen here now with a big confluence of armies. So before everybody else gets there, we've got a Malazan force holding Liheng. It's a Malazan town, formerly a Wiccan town. Even before that, just the people of Liheng who were kind of connected to the Wiccans, but kind of their own thing and had their own magic. And there's a whole bunch of stuff with that. But the Malazan force that was quartered in Liheng is surrounded by rebel Wiccans now, who have the help of some of those previous heroes of the Malazan Empire who are now against Lassine, particularly Tok the Elder. And they're at a point where we're going to lose. We don't have what it takes to hold off the Wiccans. They are going to conquer us, and we're not going to go down without a fight. So they play the last card they have, which is freeing Rolanderus, which they already know is a bad idea because he goes way back to the time of the first heroes, things we only kind of know a little bit about. He's supposedly the brother of Treach, who's now the new god of war. He is a powerful being, a magical being, and apparently has a penchant for violence. He was trapped by the previous emperor for the good of everybody because his nickname, the White Jackal, he was out there destroying anyone he'd come across. He'd gone crazy, perhaps. It was hard to understand. The Wiccans see him as a god, but they also know he's a very dangerous god. One of the things he was most known for was being unpredictable, which is why he was so dangerous. You never knew when he was going to go violent and kill everyone in sight. Well, freeing him results in very predictable violence, and they aim him like a bullet at the Wiccans outside and the forces, mercenaries that are working with the Wiccans. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of damage that gets done. Lots of people die. Eventually, he is stopped, not killed, but sent away through a portal to where he can do no more harm to Quantali. But a whole mess of people die because of that decision. It's not exactly saving the day, but the Malazans behind it are still At least some of them are still alive. They haven't fallen yet. Okay, so Relanders can do no more harm on Quantali. We've got other harm that's going to happen still. So there's still Malazan forces against Wiccan forces. And the Wiccan forces, I mentioned, took the elders with them. Also, Urko Crust, another one of the old original guys of Malazan. He's on hand to help make a difference. These guys are done with Lacine. We also get to meet Rel. This was fascinating. He's an amazing warrior with some mystery behind him, and we come to learn he's one of the fabled Segula people, an undefeated warrior race whose style of fighting is practically unstoppable. Rel may be the best who lives of the Segula. We've encountered them before in a previous book, and it was fascinating. Memories of Ice. That's, I'm pretty sure, where we met the Segula before. Rel is in self-imposed exile from his people, which is why he doesn't act like them, he doesn't dress like them, he's a little different, but he is also still a little different from everyone else around him, so when we come to understand he's Segula, that explains a lot. Also why he's so good at combat. We also have a ragtag mercenary army. We have the Crimson Guard forces. We have other Crimson Guard forces who rally around Prince Devor. So we've got guard against guard in this whole thing that's happening. And then Empress Lacine's forces does show up, kind of the last ones to the party. And they all end up in one chaotic battle royale that results in a lot of people dead. It was pretty awesome. But eventually, everyone just goes home, goes their separate ways, relatively unsatisfied. It's like, okay, that's done now. Doesn't feel a lot like victory, but it's done. The Wiccans are the ones who can actually feel pretty good at the end because their actions in the midst of all of this earn them autonomy. They are free from Malazan rule. At least for now. We'll see if that lasts. The Crimson Guard, they have fulfilled their vow because the Malazan leadership has fallen during all this. So they'll now be seeking a new path, although part of its forces are now rogue and clearly on a darker path, and we'll see where that goes. Part of why the vow is done is Empress Lacine is dead. She was taken out, though, by an assassin, not by the Crimson Guard, not by the Wiccans. She survives all the battle stuff, and then right at the end, stabbed in the back. Who did it isn't named. We saw this assassin up against the Claw. Pearl earlier totally kicked his butt, wiped the room with him, and was going to kill him, but then was interrupted and took off again. Whoever it is has amazing powers. And now, come on, we know who this is. It's Absolar, given the mission by Dancer, Cotillion, the rope. We get to see her finally fulfilling the last of the hit list she was given. She just shows up, kills Lacine, peace out. I was kind of like, did that really happen? What the heck? Whoa! And awesome! It messed with some of my previous predictions, but still, okay, Lacine's gone. We can move on. Things change. What changes? What exactly is going to happen now that Ding Dong the Witch is dead? To be determined. There's plenty more I could discuss, but that's enough for me for this rapid review episode. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know your thoughts. If there are things from this book that I didn't talk about that you want to emphasize for me, again, not spoiling stuff to come, but just to further illuminate some of these things, I welcome those in the comments. This was full spoiler rapid review, so put them down there. If there are things that I mentioned that I got wrong, without spoiling, feel free to illuminate. I made some guesses. Don't tell me whether I'm right or wrong on the guesses. But if I specifically talked about what something means, that it clearly doesn't mean that, and there's something else I missed in this story, go ahead, put it down, and I will enjoy reading what you guys share with me. And of course, I always respond. Malazan is so good. I have started Toll the Hounds now. I'm 10% in. I'm loving it again. I could just live in this stuff, which is good because I've been reading this for well over a year. It's a good journey. And then I'm supposed to reread it? We'll see about that. I know I'll be digging into all the stuff online about it. I've mostly stayed away from that stuff as I'm reading through. But when I do a review episode, okay, then I dig a little bit into what's out there and the various Malazan wikis and stuff. It's fascinating to see the layers that's put in here. Okay, I got to stop before I do a whole nother episode. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll talk to you next time.